This is Andi Purewal for Boxing Social, and I'm delighted to be joined by promoter Richard Schaefer. Richard, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
It's good to hear. Obviously, you've come over for the fight on Saturday night. We start off with Joyce, your guy. How do you expect his fight with Stiverne to go?
Well, I have to tell you, before I saw Stiverne today, I think it's going to be a pretty easy night. But I sort of like adjusted my thoughts a bit after I've seen Stiverne is in unbelievable shape. He's in the kind of shape he reminds me he was in when he fought Chris Arreola or Deontay Wilder in his first fight. Tremendous athlete, tremendous shape, and I think it's going to be not as easy as I thought for Joyce. But then having said that, Joe is a generational talent, a fighter which I believe already today, after only 7 fights, is the best heavyweight in the world. And I have a lot of experience when it comes to fighters and fights and so on, so I don't say that lightly. I know some people might say, what is he talking about? But I've seen Joe, what he's done, what he's capable of. He's never going to beat guys with his speed. He's not a very fast guy, but he's a very powerful guy. He's in the hurt business. 1 punch and you go down. 7 fights, 7 knockouts. And I think we're going to see another knockout performance from Joyce this weekend. And Joe has as well what many heavyweights don't have, which is an unbelievable chin, so he can take a punch as well. And if you can punch and you can take a punch, that's a difficult combination to beat in the heavyweight division.
You mentioned that you see Joe as the best heavyweight currently. I'll come to that later on, but just to stick with the fight on Saturday night, Bermain came in for criticism on the back of his defeat to Deontay Wilder in the second fight. How much have you guys read into that performance?
Oh, you can't really do that, you know. You have to look at the fact that he was a heavyweight world champion. You have to look at the fact that when he trains and when he's in shape, he's a top 10 heavyweight. And you saw today, you saw him. The man is in shape, mentally and physically. The way he carried himself, I expect a hell of a fight.
And to come to that comment now about Joe being the best in the world, what makes you think that? What makes you believe that he's ready just to step in to fight for a world title and to prove he's the best out there?
Well, I mean, talking to his team, talking to his trainer, Abel Sanchez as well, we have fast-tracked him. He's mentally and physically ready. We've seen it in the first 7 fights, steady progress, and he's hungry, he wants it, and when you have the opportunity, which we do have now with the WBA, then you're going to go and capture it. So if everything goes well, he will become mandatory for the regular world title and then fight for that regular WBA heavyweight title. And if he wins that, then, you know, next year hopefully we get the Joshuas or the Furies or the Wilders.
That was something I was going to come on to. You know, Anthony Joshua has 3 of the main belts tied up, 4 if you include the IBO. Deontay Wilder has the WBC belt. Provided Wilder Fury fight, and AJ is obviously fighting Jerome Miller now, if the winner of them 2 fights clash, how do you actually break into that world title scene and get the opportunity to fight for one of those belts? How difficult can it be to engineer that fight?
Well, you know, the fact is we are not aligned with a particular network, so you can fight anybody, and we're willing to fight anybody. So I think that's a big plus. So there's no network which really has constantly been behind Joe and built us up. We fought on Showtime, we fought on Fox, we fought over here with Sky, a couple of the fights. So, you know, there's like nobody who just said, hey, we invested a lot of money in Joe. No, I invested a lot of money in Joe, and we are going to go and do what is best for Joe, and that's what we're going to do.
It's interesting you bring up the fact Joe isn't tied to a certain TV station and network. The other day we saw Tyson Fury link up with Top Rank Boxing and ESPN Plus to showcase his fights over in America. Deontay Wilder being with PBC. Do you think we will see that rematch, or do you think it's going to be incredibly difficult to make now?
I think it's difficult to make because each one of those platforms, whether if it's the ESPN-BT Sport platform or whether if it is the platform of Deontay Wilder with Showtime and Fox, or whether if it's the Zone with and Sky with Anthony Joshua, all these have made substantial investments in the fighters and in the sport of boxing, and they're not going to want to see the biggest fights just go to one of their competitors, and competitors they are, you know. So I think it became very difficult to get it done. I think the only way to do it really is if you go and do a purse bid scenario where the one who bids the most wins the fight. And those who didn't win it, those who didn't bid enough, and they lose the purse bid, the only ones to blame is themselves.
Let's talk about Anthony Joshua as well. Yesterday we saw his press conference with Jarrell Miller. What do you make of that fight?
I think it's a very good fight. I'm a big fan of Jerome Baby Miller. He's very entertaining. He's very charismatic. I like him. I respect him. I like fighters, you know, who have a bit charisma and can fight, and he's one of them. So I think it's the perfect fight for Anthony Joshua to come to the U.S. And you know, I'm happy that fight got made.
What have you made of Eddie's moves into the US market? One of the first British promoters to try and do what he is with Dazn and the online platform. Do you think they can challenge the likes of the Showtimes or the PBCs and the ESPNs with Top Rank? And do you think Matchroom and Dazn can challenge all of those companies out in the States, or do you think it's going to be difficult to try and break down the station networks?
Well, you know, I think the initial success from a audience or from a live gate point of view has been rather spotty, but it's too early to tell. You know, they just started, so you need to give them an opportunity and a chance to build up their subscriber base. I mean, they have landed Canelo Alvarez, and they are bringing Anthony Joshua now to the U.S. So these are, you know, important fighters, and you know, I say the more the merrier. If it helps the sport, it helps all of us, and you know, so we'll see what happens. But you know, in the end of the day, they're throwing a lot of money around, but who they were able to attract, you know, beside Canelo in the U.S., it has been very spotty. All those other fighters they had on their target list, they weren't able to get. So it's not only the money, because believe it or not, even in boxing, such thing as loyalty exists, and these fighters some of them might be promotional free agents, but nevertheless they're loyal to being an Al Heyman, for example, and PBC and the networks which have telecast and built them up all of their career, you know, in some cases. So they're not just gonna, because somebody flashes a bigger check, they're not just gonna jump ship. And in a way, that's refreshing to see that it's not just about money. And because if it would just be about money, you know, then, you know, maybe some of those fighters might have left. But you know what it is as well? It's about eyeballs. And if you truly want to become a star, if you want to become known, then if you are going to be seen in front of millions of people watching from home, or you're going to be seen from a few 100,000 people watching from home, I mean, it's going to be much easier to become a star if you have millions of people watch you instead of a few 100,000. And I think that's important as well, because in a way, the money follows, you know. And if you are a fighter and you believe in your abilities in the ring and your abilities in your charisma outside of the ring, then you bet on yourself, because you're the best bet to take. And you don't want to be in an environment where maybe up front you make much more, but then later on, as you become a star, you sort of like are confined to how much you can earn because of the lack of a pay-per-view structure. So, you know, like you see the perfect example with Floyd Mayweather. He believed in himself, and the sky was the limit, and he ended up making a few $100 million a fight.
And to finally touch on, you're flying back out on Sunday for the Mikey Garcia and Spence fight. Yeah. Excited for that one?
Oh, very excited. That is that night on March 16th from the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. That's going to determine, I call it the coronation, because these are two of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters. And most experts have them ranked within the top 5, but to have two guys which are among the top 5 best pound-for-pound fighters fighting each other is extremely rare, because they have to be in the same, more or less in the same weight class. So that doesn't happen very often, and it does happen on March 16th. And whoever wins that fight is going to be the king of the sport, the king of boxing, and is going to be crowned as the new pound-for-pound king. And it's an intriguing and fascinating matchup, because, you know, people, wherever I go, they ask me who is going to win that fight. And you were probably going to ask me as well. So, you know, there's sort of like two sayings in boxing. One of them is, a great big man always beats a great small man. And if that is true, then Errol Spence will win that fight, because he is the bigger man. He's the stronger man. But then there is another saying. The other saying, which was really made famous by my good friend Floyd Mayweather, and that is, skills pays the bills. And if it's skills pays the bills, you will have Mikey Garcia win that fight. Because his skill level, he's today, without any question, technically, from his boxing IQ, the most skilled fighter in the sport. So is it going to be great big man beats a great small man, or is it going to be skills pays the bills? I don't know. That's what makes it such a fascinating matchup.
Richard Schaefer, I appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. All the best to you and good luck.